And for right now, I'll just remove this slider node because I don't really need to see it. This custom attribute node, I can kind of pipe whatever it is I want into it. And if I double click on the sphere, you'll see that if I go over to the sphere level, here's my custom attribute and the parameter that has been added. So I can rename these and adjust them in any way that I want. Just by renaming the node, you'll rename the rollout, which is really pretty helpful. So let's add the stretch value to this. We're going to call this stretch mod, and I'm just going to call this amount. Now I can simply take this stretch, set a Bezier flow for it, and then drag that into the amount of that guy there. Just move these over so that they're a little bit more organized. So now if I double click on the sphere, you can see that we have the rollout name stretch and the amount right here, where we set up our stretch for our object. Now maybe we don't want this on the base level here, but as I said, you can add it to any modifier or any state anywhere. So let's just add a new modifier to the modifier stack. I'm just going to drag out the object level for that and click on modifier, and we'll add an attribute holder modifier. And from that, you see that we have our custom attribute set up. So I'm actually just going to disconnect this really quickly because these are all my custom attributes and they're already all wired up, and I'm going to pipe them into the custom attribute for this attribute holder. So now the attribute holder is at the top of the stack, and you see we already have the amount and the stretch set up for it. So we may want to set up some min and max values for this, and we can do that really pretty easily. What I'm going to do is just go to the amount and right click and say edit appearance, and I'm going to set up a maximum of 1 and maybe a minimum of -1. And then what I'll do is actually decide what controller type I want. So right now, and by default, it's set to spinner, but we can choose slider, checkbox, or anything else. So I'll choose apply, and you see now we have the amount slider, and you'll also see that we have the minimum maximum set of the slider, so it can really help us with defining what ranges we want to have. I'll just keep this stretched this way, and we'll take a look at our setup here. So now we have a few manipulators set up, as well as a custom attribute and some other things going on, which is really pretty useful in our scene. Next, I want to take a look at a couple of scenes that we've set up like this using some different objects like materials and effects and particles and things like that. So what I'm going to do is just go down here to the layers palette, and we'll just hide our base layer, and I'm going to bring up our architectural layer, which has a lamp in it, and we'll switch over to that. See that in this tab we have a light set up, and zoom out a bit so we can see this lamp, and we have a slider made that is set up as a dimmer. And what the dimmer does is it makes the light a little bit brighter, and it also controls the self-illumination on our anisotropic shader. So this is really easy to set up. We have a slider here, and that is controlled by this Bezier controller, which is controlling the light, and it is also controlling the anisotropic self-illumination here. And that is getting piped through simple expression controller that's dividing that by 3 so that we have the proper setup here. When this goes, it will go all the way to 100%, and when it's down, it'll go down to 0% when the light is off. So that's something that can be really useful for architecture scenes where you have a lot of lights that you want to bring up or bring down, or simple things like when have a scene in a lobby and you're waiting for an elevator and you want doors to open, you can have nice sliders to do that, or LCDs to turn on. You can kind of set those things up, and you can set them to turn on and their self-illumination, and maybe set a light that's going to add some bounce light to the scene there, all with either custom attributes or spinners, and be able to visualize that very easily right here. So the next scene that I want to take a look at here is just the effects, and I'm going to pop over to the effects here. And you can see in this layout we have a pretty simple layout. Again, this is some light, a lens effects glow, set up a atmospheric effect with the fire effect, and all that stuff is being controlled with this custom attribute. And the custom attribute is just wired to this little volume gizmo here. So beyond just simple rigs and other things, you can control the effects trees, lens effects, different atmospheric effects, volume lights, all those things with Zookeeper. And we can set up our custom attributes here. So right now, if I just render this out quickly, you'll see that we have a little fire effect, and then a glow from the light. And the light is also casting the same color as this filter color. We can change this over to blue, and you can see the filter color changes there, and the color will change for that light. And when this renders out, we get the blue flames and the blue glow and all those things like that, which is pretty interesting. And we can also adjust the flame size, which is just wired to the scale of that particular gizmo. So that's a pretty interesting setup that you can do very, very quickly, making use of the effects in Max as well as lens effects and atmospheric effects. So going more down the effects road, I just want to bring up a quick scene with some particles that has an interesting manipulator setup. And when we go into the Particles tab, you can see we have another simple node setup. None of these are really huge or unwieldy node setups. They're all very basic, just to kind of show how you can interact with all the different objects in 3ds Max. And you can obviously make very, very complex scenes and node setups as well. So this has a basic particle system, and the only thing we've really set up here is a point helper. And as you can see from the particle system here, that point helper is driving the axis speed of our particle system. So if I go in here and just kind of start to move that, you can see that that axis spread is changing, and you can adjust that interactively in the scene. So if you needed to animate the spread of a particle system or anything else for that matter, you could easily set up a couple of manipulators. This isn't a max manipulator, but it's just a point helper that is adjusting the particles, and you have access to any of the parameters inside any particle system or anything like that, as well as the materials for that, as you can see from here. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of some of the things that you can set up with Zookeeper and how it expands across the entire 3ds Max interface and can deal with all the different objects in 3ds Max to help you organize and set up some interesting scenes. Thank you very much.